The music stopped when Sterling stood up, not because anyone had signaled the orchestra, because 300 people in that ballroom understood, in the specific way that crowds understood danger, that the quality of what was about to happen required silence, and the musicians felt it, and let the last note die without being asked. Clara felt the silence arrive the way you felt a change in weather, before you could name it, before you could prepare for it, in the specific physical way of something shifting in the air around you. She had been waiting for this. She had been waiting for it for 4 months, since the first whisper had reached her through her network of household contacts that Sterling had been listening to Pemberton, and Pemberton had been filling his ear with the specific poison of a man who needed Sterling's attention directed elsewhere, while his own considerable vulnerabilities were unexamined. She had been watching Sterling's paranoia develop across the months, with the specific careful attention of a woman who understood that paranoia, once seeded, required feeding, and who had been tracking what was feeding it and from which direction. She had also been quietly, systematically, preparing for the moment he would act on it. She had not known it would be here. 300 guests, every significant lord and foreign ambassador in the empire, the annual Silver Gala, the most observed social occasion of the year. She had not known it would be here, but she was not, sitting in her diamond-encrusted silver gown at the imperial table, with Sterling rising to his feet beside her, surprised. She was ready. But before we go to the portfolio, before we watch her personal guard place the leather folder in the center of the imperial table and watch Sterling's face understand what he has done, I need to ask you something. If someone attacked you in public, in front of everyone whose opinion mattered, and you had been quietly building the response for 4 months, would you use it? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Clara had a choice in the moment Sterling finished speaking. She could have deflected. She could have wept. She could have played the wounded wife and survived the evening with minimal damage. She did not deflect. Subscribe and hit the bell. And tell me where you are watching from tonight. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. Clara Ashwood had married Sterling Mayfair with the specific clear eyes of a woman who understood what she was doing. Not love, or not only love, which was a distinction she had been honest with herself about from the beginning. She had loved him in the early years, or loved the version of him that existed in the early years, which was a man of considerable intelligence and genuine charm, who had the specific quality of someone who recognized excellence in others and found it attractive rather than threatening. He had recognized it in her. She had been 23 and he had been 31, and he had seen her across a dinner table and had said, with the directness that she had found appealing, that he had never met anyone who thought like she did, and that he intended to marry her. She had considered this for 2 months. She had said yes. The early years had been, in the specific honest accounting she sometimes did late at night in the study that was hers, good. Not uncomplicated. Sterling was not an uncomplicated man, and his intelligence had a specific quality of suspicion built into it. The particular habit of a man who had been raised by a father who trusted no one and had learned to organize his own intelligence around the question of what people were really after. But the suspicion had been manageable. He had trusted her, which was different from trusting most people, and the trust had given them something real to build on. Then his father had died. The inheritance had been larger than expected, but also more complicated, which was the specific way of inheritances from men who had been secretive with their money. Sterling had been managing the estate's complex financial picture for 3 years when the gambling had begun. She had not known immediately, which was the specific design of a man who understood that concealment was a professional skill. She had found out in year 5, not everything, not the full scale, which had taken her another year to understand, but the beginning of the picture, and the picture had told her several things. The first thing it told her was that the debts were significant. The second thing it told her was that Sterling was not going to stop gambling, which was not a question of willpower, but of the specific quality of compulsion that organized itself around the specific high of certain kinds of risk. The third thing it told her was that if the debts were discovered, by the Crown, by creditors, by any of the considerable number of parties who would use the information, the House of Mayfair would be stripped of its title and land, which was not a hypothetical, but a specific provision of the estate law that her father's solicitor had explained to her clearly when she had shown him the documents she had found. She had made a decision. She had not told Sterling she knew. She had begun, quietly and systematically, to address the problem herself, finding the debts through her own investigation of the financial records she managed, for the estate's public-facing accounts, identifying the creditors through channels she had developed across 9 years of managing the social and administrative landscape of a significant estate, and beginning the specific patient work of retiring the debts in a way that would not produce questions. She had been doing this for 2 years. She had used the funds she had legal authority to manage, the Eastern Territory's maintenance budget, which was substantial and which she administered directly, and she had structured the payments as legitimate investments and infrastructure expenditures because that was what they legally needed to be, and because she was very good at making things legally what they needed to be. She had saved the House of Mayfair. Sterling had not known. Sterling had, instead, begun to hear whispers about her transactions from Pemberton, who had hired the specific kind of financial investigator who was good at identifying unusual transaction patterns, and who had presented the patterns to Pemberton, and Pemberton had presented them to Sterling, and Pemberton had presented them as evidence of what Pemberton had wanted Sterling to believe they were evidence of, the Eastern lover. She had been aware of this narrative for 4 months. She had been aware of it, and had understood, tracking its development through the specific network of information she had cultivated across 9 years of marriage, that Sterling was going to act on it eventually, and that the acting was going to be the specific kind of acting that a paranoid man with considerable public authority performed, which was public. She had prepared accordingly. She had done this with the specific patient quality of a woman who had been preparing for difficult things for 9 years, and who had learned that preparation was the only instrument that produced reliable outcomes when the difficult things arrived. She had prepared for a private confrontation. She had also prepared for a public one. The Silver Gala was the most observed social occasion in the Mayfair calendar, which Sterling knew, and which Clara knew, and which made his choice of it significant in the specific way of a man who understood that public destruction was the complete destruction, the kind that left no room for recovery, the kind that finished things. He had chosen it. She had her guard in the room. He was standing near the east entrance, with the leather portfolio that she had handed to him 4 days ago, with the specific, careful instructions that he had followed, with the precision of a man who understood, working for her. That precision was the requirement. She had also, this morning, sent copies to Lord Magistrate Harrington's office, who was present at the gala, because evidence existed in multiple locations, or it did not exist at all. She had also, this morning, informed 3 of the senior lords who were present, men she had cultivated relationships with across 9 years of social management, that something significant was likely to happen this evening, and that they should be attentive to the documentation that would be presented if it did. She had done all of this before putting on the silver gown. She had sat at her dressing table this morning, and she had looked at her own face, and she had thought about 9 years, and the decision she had made in year 5, and the 2 years of careful, quiet work, and the 4 months of watching the paranoia develop, and she had thought about what was coming, and she had felt, as she had expected to feel, entirely calm. Lords and ladies of the realm. Sterling's voice had the booming quality of a man who had used it for authority for decades, and who had deployed it now with the full weight of what he believed was coming. Clara had heard it beside her ear, and she had remained still. She was very good at remaining still. I stand tonight to question the loyalty of my own duchess. The room's quality had changed. She had felt the specific shift of 300 people understanding that they were present for something that would be discussed for years. She had let Sterling speak. She had let him say all of it. The months of secret transactions, the unnamed entity in the East, the word treason, the demand for a confession, and a naming of the secret lover. And she had sat with her hands in her lap, and her face composed, and she had felt nothing that showed. When he finished, the silence had the quality of a room that had been holding its breath. She had stood, not hurriedly, with the specific, deliberate quality of a woman who was taking her time, because her time was hers, and she understood this. She had smoothed her diamond-encrusted silver gown. She had looked at Sterling. He had been looking back at her with the specific quality of a man who had just fired a devastating weapon and was waiting for the damage to reveal itself. She had looked at the room. 300 faces, all of them turned toward her, all of them holding the same suspended quality of people who did not yet know what they were about to witness. She had let them wait for exactly as long as she needed to. "You ask of my loyalty, Your Grace," she said. Her voice had the specific quality she had developed for rooms, the melodic carrying quality that did not require volume, that reached the back wall without strain, that had the natural authority of someone who was entirely certain of what they were saying and who was saying it for the room rather than for the person standing beside her. And you call it treason. A pause, which she used with the precision she used all of her instruments. Let the record show before the entire court of England. She had looked at Sterling as she said this. He had the specific quality of a man who was beginning to understand that something was wrong with the situation he had constructed, that the response was not the response he had anticipated, but who had not yet identified what specifically was wrong. The money transferred to the Eastern Territories was not for a lover. She watched his face. It was to secretly buy back the massive, hidden gambling debts you accumulated over the last 5 years. The room made a sound. Not individual sounds. The collective sound of 300 people receiving information simultaneously. The specific quality of a crowd encountering something it had not expected. Debts that would have seen the House of Mayfair stripped of its title and land by the Crown next Monday. The silence that followed had a different quality from the silence before. Before had been the silence of anticipation. This was the silence of comprehension. She had watched Sterling's face do the specific sequence of things that faces did when the architecture of a constructed situation was suddenly revealed, the color leaving, the specific quality of a man understanding that he had been holding a weapon he had not fully examined, and that the weapon had been designed for him. She had gestured to her guard. He had come forward with the portfolio. He had placed it in the center of the imperial table, directly into the space between Sterling's plate and his wineglass, with the specific deliberate quality of something being placed where it could not be ignored. 300 people were looking at it. Sterling was looking at it. Clara was looking at Sterling. "I didn't hide the transactions to betray you," she said. Her voice had not changed quality. Still the melodic carrying authority. Still the complete composure. Still the quality of a woman who was saying things she had organized very carefully, and who was delivering them now with the precision of the organizing. "I hid them to protect the family name from your own reckless hidden vices." She let this land. "Every document in that folder bears your personal signature and your secret seal." She watched him look at the folder. "I didn't fund a rebellion." She looked at the room, the specific deliberate sweep of a woman who was speaking to everyone, and not only to the man beside her. "I funded your salvation." Sterling opened the portfolio. She had expected this, had known, understanding him as she did, that the instinct would override everything else, that the need to verify or deny would be immediate and would happen publicly, which was its own specific outcome. He opened it, and he began to look at the documents with the quality of a man who was looking for the gap, the falsification, the specific error that would give him the ground to stand on, and he was not finding it, because there was no gap, and there was no falsification. The signatures were his, the seals were his, the dates were his, the amounts were his. Everything in the portfolio was irrefutably, unmistakably, legally his, because she had been meticulous for 2 years about documenting everything for exactly this purpose, not because she had planned to use it, but because documentation was the habit of a woman who understood that the only protection available to her was truth, and that truth required evidence. He was looking at the evidence of his own ruin. She had let him look. She had let the room watch him look. She had let Lord Magistrate Harrington, who was seated 3 places down the table, lean forward and read the documents over Sterling's shoulder with the specific quality of a magistrate receiving professional information in a public setting, which had its own specific legal implications. She had let the foreign ambassadors observe. She had let the senior lords she had briefed exchange the specific quiet looks of people, confirming what they had been told was likely to happen. She had let all of it happen while she stood in her silver gown and waited. Then she had looked at Sterling one final time. He had looked up from the portfolio. His hands had been shaking with the specific fine tremor of someone whose body was responding to a level of stress that exceeded the body's management capacity. She had looked at him with the specific quality of a woman who had made a decision with clear eyes, and who was making another decision now with the same eyes, which was the decision to finish this with the composure she had maintained throughout, which was the only composure that mattered, because it was the one the room would remember. "You questioned my loyalty in public, Duke Sterling," she said. Her voice did not change. "But tonight, you have only proven your own unworthiness." She had looked at the room, the 300 guests, the ambassadors, the magistrate, the senior lords, the specific assembled authority of everything that mattered in the empire, gathered in one room. "Enjoy the rest of your gala." She had turned. The silver train swept the floor behind her. She had walked toward the doors. She heard the cheering begin somewhere behind her before she reached the threshold. Not the orchestrated applause of a formal occasion, the specific spontaneous quality of 300 people responding to something genuine. The sound of a room that had witnessed something it had not expected, and that was expressing what it had witnessed with the only instrument available to a crowd, which was noise. She had not turned back. She had walked through the doors and into the corridor, and she had gone to the private rooms that were hers, and she had stood in the center of them for a moment, in the silence after the ballroom, and she had examined this with the honest precision she brought to everything, what she was actually feeling in this moment, not triumph. Something more complicated. She was tired. 2 years of careful hidden work, managing the specific daily weight of knowing what she knew and not saying it, carrying the responsibility for the survival of a house whose master had nearly destroyed it and had rewarded her protection with an accusation of treason in front of 300 witnesses. She was tired and she was resolved, and she felt, underneath both, the specific quality of something that had been held at arm's length for a long time, finally being set down. She had set it down. Harrington came to her in the morning. She had been expecting him. He was a man of 60, who had been the magistrate for the Mayfair territories for 20 years, and who had the specific quality of a man who had seen most things, and who had developed, across the seeing of most things, the particular pragmatic understanding that institutions were most useful when they were honest about what they were doing. He had sat across from her in the morning room, and he had looked at her with the assessment quality, and she had looked back. "The documents from last night," he said, "were forwarded to your office yesterday morning," she said, "before the gala, along with the 3 supplementary files that the portfolio did not include." He was quiet. "You anticipated the possibility that he would act last night," he said. "I anticipated the possibility," she said. "I did not know the timing." He had looked at her. "The financial irregularities documented in these files," he said, "constitute grounds for the declaration of administrative incapacity under the estate law provisions of 1847. "Yes," she said. "The Crown's standard for removal of ducal authority in cases of financial corruption is—" "I know the standard," she said. "The documentation meets it. Each debt instrument, the total liability, the methods of concealment, the period across which the concealment was maintained, the documentation is complete." He had looked at her for a long moment. "You have been managing this for 2 years," he said. "Yes," she said. "And you did not come to the magistrate's office," he said. "If I had come to your office," she said, "the process would have been public, and Sterling would have had the opportunity to contest it, and the House of Mayfair would have been in legal proceedings for months or years, while the estate's standing was in question, which was the outcome I was specifically trying to prevent. You protected him from the consequences of his own actions," Harrington said. "I protected the estate," she said, "and the people who depend on it, and the family name, which is also mine." He was quiet. "He accused you of treason in front of 300 witnesses," Harrington said. "Yes," she said. "That will have its own consequences," he said. "I expect it will," she said. She waited. "The process will take approximately 48 hours, Harrington said. "I will need a formal statement from you." "I have prepared one," she said. "It is in the envelope on the table." He looked at the envelope. He picked it up. He stood. "Duchess Ashwood," he said. "Lord Magistrate," she said. He had looked at her with the expression of a man who had seen most things and was adding this to the catalogue. "I have been a magistrate for 20 years, he said. "I have seen the law applied in most of the ways it can be applied." He paused. "I do not think I have seen it used quite this precisely." "It is a precise instrument," she said, "when it is used for what it was designed for." He had nodded. He had left. The 48 hours had the quality of hours that contained the specific machinery of institutional process, formal statements, recorded depositions, the movement of legal documents through the channels that legal documents moved through when the institution was functioning as it was designed to. She had been present for all of it. She had answered every question directly and completely and without embellishment, with the specific precision of a woman who understood that the record was permanent and that the record was what mattered. Sterling had been summoned and had appeared with the quality of a man who had spent 48 hours understanding the dimensions of what had happened in the ballroom and who had arrived at the magistrate's proceedings with the specific hollow quality of someone whose architecture had collapsed. He had not looked at her. She had not looked at him with anything other than the composed neutrality that the proceedings required. The determination had come on the afternoon of the second day, administrative incapacity under the estate law provisions. The House of Mayfair's ducal authority transferred, pending formal review, to the surviving member of the ducal household who had demonstrated competent management of the estate's affairs. The determination named her. The arrangement that followed took 3 weeks to formalize, which was the specific time that institutional arrangements required, and she had been patient across those weeks, with the patience of a woman who had been patient for 2 years and to whom 3 more weeks was manageable. Sterling had been removed to the country house. He had left without a confrontation, which had surprised her until she understood, from the specific quality of him in the magistrate's proceedings, that the confrontation capacity had gone out of him, that what had organized his paranoia and his aggression had been the specific energy of a man who believed he was in control, and that the belief was gone now, and without the belief, the energy had nothing to organize around. She did not hate him. She had examined this carefully and found it accurate. Not love, which had gone some years ago. Not forgiveness exactly, which would require more time and more distance, and the specific internal work that she had not yet done. Simply the absence of hate, which was its own specific thing, the recognition that a man could be weak and paranoid and cruel in the specific way of someone who had built his authority on sand and had finally watched it go, and that the watching had produced something that was genuinely pathetic in the original sense of the word, which was worthy of pathos. She felt pathos. She did not feel hate. She felt, primarily, the specific quality of a woman who had work to do and who was going to do it. The throne room on the morning of the formal sealing had the quality of a room that was doing what it was designed to do, which was to hold significant moments with the appropriate gravity. She had arrived at it with her secretary and her solicitor and the specific team of people who had been helping her manage the estate's administrative transition, and she had sat in the ducal chair, the specific chair that held the formal authority of the Mayfair territories, and she had felt it in the way of something that was simply the next thing, the specific continuation of work she had been doing for years, now formalized. She had held the seal, not triumphantly. She was not a triumphant woman by nature, which was one of the qualities that had made her specifically good at the specific work she had been doing for 2 years. She was methodical. She was precise. She was, at the fundamental level, interested in the work, rather than in what the work looked like to people who were watching. She was the Duchess of Mayfair by the formal determination of the Crown's magistrate, in recognition of the competent management of the estate's affairs that she had been demonstrating for 2 years. She was also, she understood in the specific clarity of the morning room, simply herself. Not the title, not the silver gown, not the 300 faces in the ballroom, or the cheering that she had walked away from without turning back. Herself. Clara Ashwood, who had made a decision with clear eyes 9 years ago, and had spent those years being precisely who the decision required, and who was now in the chair with the seal in her hand and the work in front of her. The work was considerable. The estate's financial position, while significantly improved by her 2 years of debt management, still required attention. There were operational inefficiencies she had identified and had not yet had the authority to address, and there were staffing decisions she had been waiting to make and could now make, and there was the specific project of restoring the Eastern Territories' development budget to its actual purpose, which was the development of the Eastern Territories. She had a list. She had, in fact, had the list for some time. She looked at the seal in her hand. She set it down on the table beside her, and she picked up the first document from the stack her secretary had placed there, and she read it with the attending quality she brought to everything that required it. She began to work. Tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you? Was it the portfolio in the dinner plate, the voice that reached the back wall without strain, the cheering she walked away from, the magistrate's proceeding, or the morning she sat in the chair with the first document? Drop it below. I want to know what you're carrying from this one. And tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story opens with a woman who discovers, on the morning of her wedding anniversary, a letter her husband wrote 10 years ago that he never sent, and the letter tells her everything she needed to hear back then and did not. I'll see you there.